Viscount Melise and his daughter Irina showed up at this super important reception for their family. Irina's fiancé Hans is gonna be here too. So the Viscount's telling Irina to keep it classy, you know? Off to the side, Duke Leighton's working the room, greeting all the guests. But Irina's eyes are glued to the former Grand Duchess, Wilhelmina Leighton, the queen of gossip. The Duke plucked her from some broke-ass family and married her, but he kicked the bucket soon after, making her a widow who's younger than her stepson. While Viscount Melise is kissing up to the Leighton family, Irina can't take her eyes off Wilhelmina. Snapping out of it, she bows to the Leightons too, but suddenly feels dizzy as hell. She's gonna puke, clamps her hands over her mouth, and is totally freaking out. Wilhelmina leans in close to Irina, shocked by how skinny she is. This girl's already skin and bones, and she shows up here in heels and a corset. The Duchess grabs her face and says she needs to eat like yesterday. Before she got married, Wilhelmina was a noble's daughter, but her family was drowning in debt. So she got a job and busted her butt trying to make some money. This draining feeling, it felt way too familiar. And that's when it hit her. She remembered her past life. Back then, she was a tutor at Kim Han Learning Center, and at 32, she suddenly kicked the bucket and woke up in this fantasy world. Our girl decided to use her teaching skills to make it big in this new life. But then her family suddenly went bankrupt because of her dad's relative, who gambled away everything they owned. And just like you'd expect, Wilhelmina got sold off like she was some piece of seized property. In this fantasy world, human rights are practically non-existent, and you can't even refuse an inheritance. The Duke entered the room where the heroine was sitting and scanned the girls. That's how Wilhelmina ended up being sold off to an elderly aristocrat who'd already buried 4 wives. From then on, she took the name Leighton, the most powerful noble family in the West. The girl dreaded to imagine what life in the duchy would be like if her husband had already managed to bury 4 wives. On the way there, she even considered running away, but realized in time that she wouldn't succeed. However, when Wilhelmina arrived at the duchy, shocking news awaited her. The Duke had passed away from a heart attack, and the girl had to attend the funeral even though there hadn't been a wedding ceremony. Not only was this the heroine's first marriage, something that hadn't even happened in her past life, but she immediately became a widow. During the mourning period, no one cared about the new mistress, and without introducing her to anyone, they immediately settled her in a separate estate. It's been 2 months since Wilhelmina moved into the estate they set aside for her. Even though the maid kept saying she was sorry the lady wasn't living in the main castle, the girl herself was happy. Anna was really touched when Wilhelmina said she liked living with them. The maid told her that the Duke's inauguration ceremony had happened last week, and in a week there's supposed to be a New Year's reception with a VIP guest from the royal family. The heroine was genuinely happy with her new life, especially since she used to be stressed about her family's debts. She wished she could stay here forever, but once everything's settled, they'll probably kick her out, 'cause the Leightons don't need a young widow hanging around. The girl figured that when she left this place, she'd go back to the capital and start her own business, or maybe just travel. Wilhelmina was hoping they'd at least give her some cash for the road. Just then, the butler walked into the room and announced that the Duchess Leighton was here to see her. The heroine had no clue what she wanted from her. But when the butler mentioned the conversation concerned Wilhelmina's future, she knew this was it. On the way to the drawing room, the man relayed the Duchess's request to watch her tongue. Clearly, she wanted Wilhelmina to know her place and speak respectfully. But the truth is, the Duchess was a real stickler for hierarchy. So, she wanted the girl to treat her like a sister-in-law, which was pretty awkward, considering Wilhelmina was way younger than the Duchess. In the drawing room, a perfect lady awaited, a proud and flawless gem of the West. Helena von Leighton stood by the window, sunlight streaming across her bare shoulders. However, for this woman, discipline was way more important than pride. Turning to Wilhelmina, she called her mother and greeted her. The main character was struck by the fact that the Duchess didn't seem even slightly awkward. Helena apologized for the late visit and invited the girl to sit down. While waiting for tea, Wilhelmina thought about how fate had so unexpectedly forced her to play the role of mother-in-law. And yet, Helena was a representative of the imperial bloodline and the lady of the Leighton house, a woman known as a star of high society and a role model for all noble young ladies. Before starting the conversation, the Duchess asked if her mother-in-law had been doing well at the estate. She herself, she said, was spending her days as always, caught up in her duties. It sounded as if Helena was trying to excuse herself for not having invited Wilhelmina to visit sooner. Having finished with the pleasantries, the Duchess suggested getting to the point of her visit and discussing future plans. The Laytons have decided to accept Wilhelmina as a full member of their family. The heroine was so shocked to hear this, she actually gasped. Ignoring that, Helena also announced that her mother-in-law would be attending the upcoming receptions. Even though Wilhelmina had never been in high society, she understood how important the New Year's reception at the duchy was. If she shows up there, no matter how high the Laytons' titles are, they won't escape the gossip. On top of everything else, some big shot is supposed to attend the reception. Wilhelmina was so stunned by all this, she almost asked if they were out of their minds. But the Laytons probably weren't doing this out of pity. Her mother-in-law's title gives the girl considerable power, and letting her keep it out of emotion would be too risky. The heroine suddenly remembered the butler's words about the hierarchy and realized that Helena might not be doing this by choice. She was trying to figure out if she really outranked her sister-in-law in this pecking order. There are only 2 ducal houses in the empire, and the Laytons are one of them. The only person who could put pressure on them was the emperor. The main character asked Helena about it, and from her reaction, she knew she'd hit a nerve. The emperor took the throne last year, and with that move, he obviously let Wilhelmina know he was watching her. Rumor has it, he's backing the Eastern nobility who helped him get the crown. And Duke Layton is the head of the Western aristocracy. The first empress, the previous emperor's wife, gave birth to the eldest prince and Helena, then passed away. The current emperor was the son of the second empress, and he saw the Laytons and Helena as political rivals. But the Laytons were a powerful house with vast holdings, wealth, and influence in high society. The emperor, fresh on the throne, couldn't just mess with them. Smearing a family like that, or pulling off a political scheme against them, wasn't going to be easy. But the previous duke's sudden death clearly cracked that solid foundation. Judging by Helena's reaction to Wilhelmina's guess, the emperor decided to take advantage of it. The brutal old duke, the one who offed 4 wives, just suddenly kicked the bucket. And the Layton family trying to dump his 5th wife like she's garbage? That'd be seriously messed up. So, besides the emperor, no one would dare force the duke's house to take in a great lady from a broke family. In the end, the Laytons figured it was better to keep Wilhelmina close, because kicking her out would bring down the emperor's wrath. And even if His Majesty wasn't directly leaning on them, maybe they just freaked out and decided to play it safe. So the Laytons can't just kick Wilhelmina out now, they gotta do everything they can to keep her from running. Once our girl figured all that out, she flashed Helena a smile. Now she finally gets what political games are all about. That's why she promised to show up at the party, if that's what her sister-in-law really wants. But since Wilhelmina's missing a few skills, she asked Helena for a little help. Besides everything else, the girl doesn't have a decent dress or any jewelry to speak of. So she tasked the Duchess with picking up everything she needs. Helena agreed without a peep and asked if her mother-in-law needed anything else. Wilhelmina also asked for a coat, 'cause winters out west can be brutal. The Duchess promised to send a tailor her way ASAP, but the heroine explained to Helena that she misunderstood. She just wanted warm clothes for the estate workers. Racking her brain, she figured there were about 30 servants. Responding to Helena's surprise, the girl explained that the estate staff's clothes were too light. After all, Anna came into Wilhelmina's room every morning, mumbling about how warm it was in there. The heroine stated that would be plenty enough for her. Judging by Helena's surprised face, it was clear she expected Wilhelmina to ask for money and jewels, but the girl knew that greed could seriously backfire on her. If she pushed things too far, she might end up as just the figurehead head lady, without any real power. So, when the ducal house showed generosity, Wilhelmina decided to just calmly accept it. Ending the conversation there, the heroine got up to head to a meeting with the laundry's little ones. But then the girl stopped and added that Helena was a wonderful daughter-in-law. After all, calling someone mother when you can't stand them is no easy feat. Only someone with a tough, strong character, hiding behind the mask of the perfect hostess, could pull that off. After seeing Wilhelmina out, the Duchess stood by the window for a while, remembering what the servants used to say about her. They thought she was so kind, caring, and attentive. Helena wondered if the girl was really just good-natured. It was obvious that wasn't the case, seeing as she was able to figure out the whole political situation from such a short conversation. And even though Wilhelmina comes from humble beginnings, she definitely knows how to analyze a situation. Someone who understands politics isn't just naively kind, and all of this could just be an act. Helena even thought about sending the butler, but quickly dismissed the idea since he's too gentle and fair-minded. The Duchess was so caught up thinking about Wilhelmina, she totally spaced on meeting the kids. She was gonna spend an hour with them, but she wasted almost half that time just staring out the window. Helena was surprised the kids were already out in the yard. Meanwhile, the kids themselves were practically bursting to see their mom. The Duchess yanked the heavy curtains shut and headed out of the living room. Wilhelmina's words about her being a wonderful daughter-in-law kept swirling in her head. Helena couldn't shake the feeling that the girl was seeing right through her, even though she was younger. The Duchess was definitely not digging this. She remembered her student talking about the bread and butter of all those online novels, going back, switching bodies, and being reborn. Going back always keeps your memories and knowledge, and switching bodies is like jumping into someone else's skin. Reincarnation is kinda like a comeback, but the difference is, the character's totally reborn, like a brand new person. Like, it could be a character from a book this girl was reading about getting reincarnated as a princess's mother-in-law. Those words from her student helped our girl when she got reborn as Wilhelmina, but it wasn't enough. This woman wanted to know more about human rights, working conditions, and the local culture. I mean, this fantasy world was using child labor with 14-hour shifts, but since she lived in her own building, she just changed the servant's schedule however she wanted. She was pissed that the maids were cleaning at night while she was trying to sleep, so she let them do it whenever. Wilhelmina was shocked looking at these kids, the oldest of which was only 10 years old. She couldn't wrap her head around how they could be working to earn money. It hit her hard realizing how backbreaking the work these kids were forced to do actually was. It was terrifying to think how bad things must be in other places if Leighton was considered one of the less cruel ones. But the heroine couldn't just ban the kids from working, because that would cut off their only income. One of the girls came up to Wilhelmina. She noticed that the lady's expression had gone all serious again. The girl didn't want to scare the kid, so she smiled at her. She told the girl not to worry and offered her more potatoes, but she refused. Marina looked down, embarrassed, not wanting to admit what she really wanted. But Wilhelmina understood and offered to let the girl sit on her lap. The little one was over the moon and asked the lady if she was going to stay with them for good. Getting a yes, the girl breathed a sigh of relief. Looks like the kids also figured Wilhelmina's gonna ditch the annex, with all the rumors flying around. The heroine thought she probably ought to thank the emperor. She asked Marina what she was planning to do after lunch. The little one had to pull out some seriously tough weeds. She told Wilhelmina about this kid, Johann, who's a total pro at it. The girl was surprised she hadn't heard the name before, but turns out Johann just does odd jobs for daily pay. The gardener hired him, but there's hardly any work in the fall, so the kid's in a tight spot. The kids offered Johann to work with them, but he's scared of nobles and thinks they'll start whipping him for any mistake. Even though Marina told him the new lady's nice, he still remembers the last owner. Johann's got no parents and not much work, and in the winter, he doesn't earn a dime. He lives with his little sister, and right now they're so broke, they're eating bark porridge. Wilhelmina asked the other kids if they liked Johann. The kids all said yes because he's super strong and smart, and he helps them out a lot, even when he doesn't have to. The heroine noticed that this kid had earned a pretty good rep with the other kids. They all said in unison that he was doing a great job. Wilhelmina decided to meet with Johann because she needed a gopher for errands outside the house. The autumn sun was beating down, but the boy kept working hard. He always had this thought in the back of his mind: you can't trust the rich. The memory of the master whipping him was still crystal clear. Maybe Johann's life would be easier if he just became a servant. But he was scared for Lily, who'd be left all alone if he suddenly got killed. Still, Johann tried to be grateful for any work he could get, so he busted his butt. Suddenly, the kid noticed some stranger, a woman bent over the ground. He figured he'd better get back to work, because wouldn't you know it? She was sitting right where all the weeds were. Judging by her simple clothes and the lack of servants, Johann figured this girl wasn't nobility. He walked closer and, after apologizing, told her he needed to pull the weeds in that spot. Wilhelmina looked up at Johann and apologized for getting in the way of his work. The kid thanked her, and even though she didn't look like an aristocrat, something felt off. The heroine confessed to Johann that she'd heard about him from Marina. The kid looked at Wilhelmina, surprised as she suddenly started listing all his good qualities. Word on the street was he's sharp, gets the job done, is good to his little sister, and everyone's drawn to him. Johann listened carefully to the stranger's praise as she crouched down next to him. She smelled nice, not like that over-the-top perfume those high society types usually wear. The kid thought he'd smelled that sweet scent of oils and herbs somewhere before. The stranger smiled and asked Johann if he liked potatoes. Before the boy could figure out what she was getting at, the lady unwrapped a cloth and offered him some tasty-looking spuds. Only then did Johann realize why the scent was familiar. It smelled like his mom and grandma used to, back when they were alive and making herbal remedies and baking bread. Wilhelmina offered the boy some cinnamon tea to wash down his meal. The heroine's conversation with Johann was pretty pleasant, even though he was super guarded and she couldn't quite break through to him. Even with her experience as an academy instructor, the girl couldn't completely earn his trust. But something definitely changed, because at the end of their talk, Johann asked if he could come back. Wilhelmina came here every Wednesday and promised to bring baked potatoes again next time. After talking with the kid, the heroine realized he was actually pretty sharp. Since she barely knew what was going on outside the castle walls, it hit her to hire Johann to gather intel. She was looking forward to seeing him again, because the two of them could really help each other out. Suddenly, Wilhelmina noticed the head butler from the main castle heading her way. The heroine greeted him, wondering what he needed in this wing. Turns out, the butler was there to deliver a message to Wilhelmina from Lady Helena. The Duchess sent her apologies for sending a servant, but she was way too busy to come herself. Looks like Helena didn't want to bother discussing trivial stuff in person. She played the part of a proper daughter-in-law, but she was clearly keeping her distance. The butler informed me that there would be a small reception in a week to honor the border governor's service. Since the Duchess was summoned to the capital and couldn't attend, she suggested Wilhelmina go in her place. Helena recommended her mother-in-law, hoping it would help her get used to high society in the West. The heroine smiled, amused by how elegantly the Laytons had framed the substitution. The butler said the reception would only be for a few of the Duke's inner circle, the governor, and close friends. Wilhelmina agreed, because even though it was technically a recommendation, she didn't really have a choice. At least all she had to do was fill in for the Duchess. The butler thanked the girl and promised to send a seamstress and a knowledgeable lady. Since this was Wilhelmina's debut into high society, she needed to learn the ropes. The heroine really didn't know much about etiquette, and agreed with a smile. But she did ask the butler to send some maids to help her out during the day. The girl was so tired of waking up early back in Korea, she just wanted to sleep in now. A carriage, inlaid with gold decorations, pulled up to Wilhelmina's wing. The heroine went out to greet the lady who'd been sent specifically to teach her manners. Stepping out of the carriage was the Viscount Roland's wife, the best tutor for young ladies in the Western lands. And so began Wilhelmina's first duties as the head lady. Viscountess Roland was the author of Modern Etiquette for Ladies, a total bestseller in the capital. After her husband's death, she didn't remarry, choosing instead to dedicate herself to training young ladies. Wilhelmina was given 3 days of training, which turned out to be a real trial by fire for her. The Viscountess taught her how to puff out her chest, square her shoulders, and straighten her back. She showed her how to hold her head and chin just right. Next up was learning table manners and how to properly use all that silverware. The Viscountess taught Wilhelmina how to hold a wine glass during a toast. But turns out, being the lady of the Duke's house was no walk in the park. By the end of the day, our girl was collapsing on the bed, completely wiped out. The only good thing was that she was getting fewer and fewer complaints and corrections each time. The next day, the Viscountess praised Wilhelmina for her amazing composure. Even when she made small mistakes, she didn't lose her cool, and that kind of behavior is pretty impressive for a real lady. There were still a few minor things to work on, but since Wilhelmina didn't have to dance, the party should go off without a hitch. The heroine was sure she could handle it all, since all she had to do was accept congratulations from the guests and spend time at the table. As a final piece of advice, Viscountess Roland decided to explain how to treat a young debutante. Wilhelmina couldn't help but notice that the woman had suddenly gone pale as a ghost. She suggested the Viscountess take a seat, since the lesson was just verbal anyway. Noticing the sweat on the lady's face, the heroine took her arm and helped her to the sofa. Then she went to the dresser and grabbed some kind of bundle from it. The girl handed Madame Roland a warm stone wrapped in cloth. The heroine noticed that the woman's hands were freezing, since even during lessons she would rub them from time to time. The Viscountess could have just taken off her gloves, but her manners were so impeccable that she strictly followed etiquette. Clutching the warm stone in her hands, Madame Roland thanked the girl for such an unusual hand warmer. Wilhelmina laughed, saying she'd just wrapped the stone in cloth. The Viscountess was surprised to learn the girl had sewn it herself. The heroine smiled and said it wasn't difficult at all. At the junior school training center, she had to do all sorts of things, and sewing was one of them. Wilhelmina explained that the kids got cold washing laundry by the end of autumn, so she sewed them some spares. The Viscountess was amazed at how skilled the ladies' hands were, and while all ladies know how to embroider, few do it for the sake of the servants. With that, Madame Roland took off her gloves and cupped the warm stone in her hands. Wilhelmina offered the woman some tea with ginger and dried fruit. The Viscountess was struck by the girl's choice, since ginger is considered a very expensive remedy. But the heroine really wanted the woman to warm up, since the climate in the western lands was colder than in the capital. And just by looking at the Viscountess's clothes, you could tell how much she was feeling the local chill. The woman listened to the girl's thoughtful observations with a smile. Wilhelmina laughed, because the truth was she'd never liked the cold herself. And even though she couldn't imagine what it was like to lose a beloved husband, she could easily share the lady's dislike of the weather. After drinking some hot tea and finally warming up, the Viscountess decided to review Wilhelmina's training. She had been teaching young ladies etiquette for decades: how to properly hold a fan, which hand to leave free when walking with a man, what drinks you could have at receptions, and what dishes you shouldn't eat. However, after spending many years in this field, the Viscountess realized that true learning couldn't be conveyed with words alone. Wilhelmina was starting to get what the woman was driving at. She remembered explaining to her younger students in her past life not to put their shoes on the wrong feet. How in high school she'd call out teenagers for trying to hide their phones from her, but compared to the Viscountess's job, her own past life felt way easier. Madame Roland confessed that she really wanted to teach the lady to be an example for others. Getting up, she took the heroine's hands and squeezed them gently in her own. Now the woman was sure that, in this sense, the Leighton widow had a way of thinking that she couldn't teach. Over these 3 days, the Viscountess had been watching her acts of kindness. She'd been watching the maids' faces when they served Wilhelmina, and the looks of concern from the servants when the Viscountess scolded their mistress, and the girl's constant care for them all. Madame Roland declared Wilhelmina's training complete because she possessed the most important quality a lady could have, one that comes from the heart. Only 40 nobles were invited to the Margrave's celebration, which is a pretty small gathering considering his status. The Margrave of the Western Lands is as ancient a bloodline as any ducal house, and they're a family of knights and warriors to boot. The heroine couldn't figure out why they'd decided to keep such an event so exclusive. The Viscountess told her that, officially, the Western Lands were still in mourning. But in reality, nobody was observing the mourning period, and the Duke's popularity clearly wasn't great. The heroine decided to show Helena she could be a good mother-in-law, since Helena had it rough with a father-in-law who'd gone through 5 wives. In Wilhelmina's opinion, the perfect mother-in-law is one who doesn't meddle in anything. Maybe those dramas were right when they said mothers-in-law are better off just staying out of it. A maid entered the room to prepare Wilhelmina for the event. The second the heroine stepped into the hall, she spotted the Duke in the far corner. He looked super young, more like a startup CEO than the head of an ancient house. You could tell the Leightons had once branched off from the imperial family, judging by his golden hair. The heroine felt a little anxious. This was her first official meeting with her stepson. She figured the Duke probably didn't like her much. It's gotta be weird having a stepmom who's younger than you. But Wilhelmina was totally shocked when Michael von Leighton, seeing her, rushed over, all smiles. Calling her mother, the Duke politely introduced himself. Wilhelmina was so thrown she could barely stammer out a greeting. The whole thing felt more like a student council president welcoming a new transfer than meeting your stepmom. The Duke apologized to Wilhelmina, saying that, considering the circumstances, he hadn't been able to give her the welcome she deserved. The heroine hadn't felt such strained friendliness in ages. Meanwhile, Michael kept making excuses about why he hadn't visited her sooner. Apparently, Helena said Wilhelmina needed time to adjust. The heroine thought it would have been better if the Duke hadn't brought it up at all. The girl understood there was more to Helena's words than met the eye. The new head of the family can't be too accommodating to a stepmother of low birth, or the servants will start gossiping. Sure, the Leightons have to consider the emperor, but they can't undermine the head of the family's authority. Michael asked Wilhelmina if she was comfortable living in the annex. The Duke expressed his concern about his mother living so far away. Smiling, he offered to have her move into the main castle. The heroine smiled just as kindly but turned down his offer. The girl already felt like she was being watched, and the thought of constantly hanging out with Helena didn't exactly thrill her. Living with her sister-in-law under the same roof was a nightmare scenario. Wilhelmina definitely didn't want to play the part of the wicked mother-in-law. The Duke was about to suggest something else to the girl, But right then, the butler announced that everything was ready for the reception to begin. Michael offered Wilhelmina his arm to escort her to the banquet hall. She was supposed to be filling in for Helena at this reception, so she was determined to play her part well. And now we're back to the moment when Wilhelmina is standing on the platform next to the Duke. One after another, the dignitaries greeted the Leighton family. The heroine's just standing there like a dummy, repeating the same tired lines over and over. Nobody really talks to Wilhelmina, but she can feel everyone sizing her up, trying to figure out what she's really like. All the girl can think about is grabbing a plate of food and sneaking off to the break room as soon as this is over. Just then, in walks the esteemed Viscount Melisse with his daughter, Irina. Wilhelmina's surprised at how high those heels are on such a young girl. Plus, that corset looks way too tight, and that dress is practically falling off her shoulders. It pisses the heroine off that the parents would deliberately dress their kid up like that. And it's clearly taking a toll. Irina's gone totally pale. Wilhelmina can't imagine how the girl's even gonna curtsy in that thing. She was right, because when Irina tries to bow, she suddenly looks sick and clamps her hands over her mouth. The girl wakes up on a couch in the lounge. Seeing Wilhelmina sitting across from her, looking bored, she panicked, thinking she'd messed something up. But Lady Leighton calmly asks Irina how she's feeling. Wilhelmina ordered a pureed pumpkin soup to be made to feed the girl. Irina's trying to remember what happened back in the banquet hall. Noticing the kid was dizzy, Lady Leighton declared she'd take care of her herself. Viscount Melisse tried to object, saying her grace shouldn't trouble herself, but she told him to go enjoy the reception. The Duke sent the butler to get a physician to the lounge. Knowing the physician was also a noble, and Irina wouldn't be able to relax under his gaze, she refused his help. She asked for some water with honey to be brought to the lounge, and offered to personally escort the girl. After apologizing for the commotion, she promised to return a bit later. After all, this is a reception for the border governor, and we should congratulate him properly. Irina sits across from Wilhelmina, blushing with embarrassment. Looking closer, she notices that Lady Leighton looks very young up close, even though she seemed like a stern woman from afar. The girl takes the pumpkin soup from her hands and raves about the flavor. The sweetness of honey coats her palate so pleasantly that Irina savors every sip. But then she suddenly remembers that she might gain weight from the sweets, and puts the bowl down. Wilhelmina looks intently at the girl and sighs heavily. Then she gets up, walks behind Irina, and silently starts untying her corset. The girl is flustered and doesn't understand what her grace is planning. She totally freezes up when Wilhelmina puts her arms around her from behind. Actually, the heroine just noticed that the corset fastens on both sides. Irina's worried her stomach's gonna bulge out now, but Wilhelmina keeps right on untying those tight ribbons. Tears are streaming down the girl's face. She feels super awkward sitting half naked in front of the Duchess. But Lady Leighton finally finishes untying the corset and hands Irina her wrap. She sits back down and tells the girl to drink her soup and not to worry, 'cause no one's gonna come in here. Only now does Irina realize how much easier it is to breathe without the corset, especially since she's even been sleeping in it. The girl admits to Wilhelmina that they're making her wear the corset until she gets married, so her waist stays tiny. But Lady Leighton's sure nothing bad will happen if she loosens it up a little. On top of everything else, Irina's scared to eat the soup because she might gain weight. But Wilhelmina manages to convince the girl that nothing like that will happen. So she grabs a bowl from the table and sips the warm, fragrant soup with relish. Even though our girl didn't want to give her any extra advice, she still suggested she swap out that corset for something more comfortable. 'Cause copying others won't make you prettier. Beauty's worthless if you ain't healthy. Wilhelmina tells the girl to ask herself if she really looks good right now. Irina spent ages primping before the reception, and now she notices her chest makeup is a little smudged. The Duchess explains that it's not just about having skin that's bleached white to fit the fashion. She asks if the girl's stomach hurts. The girl says no, but Wilhelmina's sure that's a lie. She's probably got digestive issues for sure. Irina's embarrassed by her words, but the Duchess thinks it'd be way more mortifying if she puked right there at the reception. The girl can't deny she's right and just lowers her head in silence. Wilhelmina gets that Irina wants to be the fairest of them all, but she shouldn't wreck her health trying to get there. But the girl's father keeps telling her she needs to be even thinner. The heroine reminds Irina that she's not marrying her dad, and Lady Melissa's fiancé, Hans, has never said a word about her figure. Wilhelmina thinks he's a pretty smart guy, 'cause what's the point of putting yourself through hell if your fiancé's happy with how you look? Then Irina admits that Tazio's workshop doesn't have any sizes bigger than that, and everyone gets their debutante dresses there. The girl was a little too plump and couldn't even squeeze into the dress. Even so, she still couldn't resist and ate some cake at the ball. And the gossips called her a hick noble. The nobles were pissed that she was pigging out at her own debutante ball. After those words, Irina threw up every night because of her tight corset. Just walking a little in those high heels made her ankles ache. Now the girl feels like an idiot because one nasty rumor almost ruined tonight's reception. Wilhelmina understands how rough it's been for her. Clearly, that's why Irina was turning down the soup. The girl thinks she looks disgusting when she eats while hungry. But Wilhelmina doesn't see anything gross or wrong with it. She carefully hands Irina the bowl of soup. Lady Layton doesn't think it's weird or shameful for someone to eat something that's not bad for them, so Irina shouldn't go thinking she's some kind of freak either. Tears are streaming down the girl's face. Wilhelmina wipes them away and promises everything they talked about will be their little secret. Relationships between kids their age, they're a minefield. It's tough being a teenager, and sometimes friends can be way worse than your own parents. Just one thing that makes you different can turn a kid's life into a total nightmare. If you rush in trying to fix these kids, it'll just backfire. What a kid needs isn't some teacher lecturing them, but someone who's got their back. Irina's happily slurping down her soup, then realizes with horror her corset won't close. But Wilhelmina's not worried about it. It's practically midnight and the party's almost over anyway. Hearing that, the girl decides she should just head home then. So, the main character never made it back to the hall like she planned, and she's probably gonna catch flack from her sister-in-law. As a parting gift, she gives Irina honey and herbs, good for digestion. The girl thanks Wilhelmina and asks if she can visit her grace again. She lowers her head shyly and clarifies that she wants to pay a personal visit. The main character doesn't know if she even has the right to invite guests over. No doubt there's all kinds of gossip about her among the nobles, which could hurt the girl. Then it hits her. She remembers the Viscountess talking about all the gatherings they throw in high society. Madame Roland suggested she get involved in something similar, like a book club or a tea party. You don't even really have to like reading for a book club. The whole point of those get-togethers is networking and making connections. The Viscountess, stone-faced, was laying it on thick. Wilhelmina had to get the allies on her side. Because high society? It's just another battlefield and it's filthy. Remembering that conversation, our girl tells Irina she's planning to host a regular book club. The kid's eyes lit up like Christmas. She's totally honored to be the first one invited to this thing. Wilhelmina's gonna take the blame for Irina missing the reception in front of Viscount Millis. But Irina's planning to tell her dad the truth, how her grace saved her from a total screw-up. Our heroine's kinda blown away that Irina's so happy over something so small. After seeing the girl off, Wilhelmina watches her from the balcony. Looks like Irina's worried about her dad, which means he can't be a complete jerk, right? But you know, when you think about it, he let his daughter get herself into this mess. Family dynamics in this world are seriously messed up sometimes. Wilhelmina watches Irina leave, then heads back to the palace. She asks a young servant boy where the Duke is right now. Turns out he went to the inner courtyard with some guests. Our girl heads to the Duke's garden, where the after-party with drinks is happening. The border governor's probably here by now, and she needs to at least say hello. Wandering through the moonlit garden, she's already regretting sending the servant away and not asking for an escort. Suddenly, Wilhelmina finds herself near a lake that's drop-dead gorgeous. She decides to take a little stroll, but then she spots some tall dude. He looks about 60, and judging by his build, even under the fancy clothes, you can tell he's a warrior. Wilhelmina didn't see this guy at the reception, and Irina and her dad were the last guests to arrive after all. Figuring this must be the border governor, the girl decides to go over and say hello, but as she gets closer, she sees the man isn't alone. The stranger's wearing unusual clothes. The fabric and pattern look kinda Eastern. His face is hidden behind a helmet, and Wilhelmina's racking her brain trying to figure out who it could be. The girl has absolutely no clue who the governor would be meeting with in such a secluded spot. The governor doesn't get why his companion decided to cancel their long-awaited meeting, but the guy insists the timing's off. Wilhelmina accidentally overheard a snippet of their conversation, and now she's totally unsure what to do. Meanwhile, the governor asks if all this is because of that weird book of poems. Even though he got rejected, he's saying not to dwell on it and suggests getting some advice. The heroine finds it a little weird that these two huge dudes are talking about love poems. But she can't just walk away like she didn't hear anything because she needs to talk to the governor. Meanwhile, the guy's about to tell his helmeted buddy what started this whole mess in the first place. But the other guy just keeps saying he doesn't want to get that close. Wilhelmina can't interrupt their conversation, so she decides to take off for a bit. But as she turns, she steps on a dry branch and the crunch gives her away. After spotting the Duchess behind the bushes, Governor Count Isanon greets her respectfully and introduces himself. The heroine interrupted them by accident, but since it happened, she doesn't have a choice. So she introduces herself too and says she's really happy to meet him. Count Isanon, the legendary frontier lord of the West and every swordsman's idol. Just as you'd expect, he's got an aura about him that Wilhelmina's never felt from anyone before. She shoots a questioning glance at the stranger next to her. He was just talking so confidently, and now he's frozen up like a statue. Wilhelmina apologizes for not being able to make it to such an important celebration. She explains that some totally unexpected stuff came up, but the Count's already heard about why she couldn't make it, so he tells the Duchess not to sweat it. She sincerely thanks him for understanding. But when she asks the Count about his companion, he just says, short and sweet, that he's an acquaintance. Wilhelmina gets the feeling Isanon's trying to hide this guy behind his back, like he doesn't want to reveal who he is. So she decides to stay out of it, 'cause nothing good's gonna come of that. She changes the subject, asking the Count about some kind of garden party he's throwing. Isanon's planning on going too, though he's on a no-booze order from the missus. Wilhelmina finds it adorable how this big dude's whole face just softened when he mentioned his wife. The Count asks the Duchess if she's planning on joining the festivities, but she just wanted to say hi to the governor, and since they already bumped into each other, she's gotta head back. Isanon tells Wilhelmina that the Duke was looking for her a little while ago, but she says she knows perfectly well when she's not wanted, where it's probably just the inner circle hanging out. Only the true lady of the house, Helena, is welcome. Even though she didn't say it out loud, the Count totally gets what she's implying. Suddenly, the air felt like it got a whole lot thicker in the room. She wishes the Count a pleasant evening and takes her leave. Wilhelmina tells Isanon not to trouble himself with seeing her out, but then he stops her, asking if he could ask her just one question. The Count asks Wilhelmina if she's ever had a man in her life, someone she was romantically involved with. She's totally thrown by the question, especially since she thought Isanon was a devoted family man, and now it seemed like he was coming on to her. With a smile, she replies that she's not interested in married men. Wilhelmina totally misread the governor, who's actually head over heels for his wife. He apologizes to the Duchess for his clumsy question. Then the Count glances at his helmeted companion and sighs for some reason. He asks the heroine if she really went to the academy. Wilhelmina confirms that she did. And then the Count says he'll help the girl reconnect with something she missed out on back then. Looking at the man with a smile, the heroine replies that she's not interested in joining any new cults. Isanon looks seriously at the Duchess and asks her not to tease him. The girl says she didn't have any romantic relationships at the academy, and even lost touch with a couple of close friends after graduation. That's not surprising, since she started looking for work after graduating, and the others were nobles who scattered to their estates. Wilhelmina insists that she hasn't had even the slightest hint of romance all this time. She figures the governor just has her mixed up with someone else. But the guy's thinking there's probably no one else quite like her. He got the feeling that guy got burned after confessing his feelings. Either way, Wilhelmina's never had anything like that happen to her. The Count finds it weird that she's never even had anyone tell her they liked her. She thinks it's kinda nuts too, 'cause she figured she'd be turning heads, but nope. After that, the three of them just stand there silently by the lake for a while. Wilhelmina says goodbye and heads back towards the estate. That dude in the helmet was totally checking her out while she was talking to the Count. I mean, if she were in their shoes, she'd probably be giving the stepmom the side eye too, especially one younger than the bride. When Wilhelmina gets to the front door, she stops dead in her tracks, totally surprised. Anna and Marina are waiting for her right on the stairs. She walks up to the girls and asks, laughing, what they're doing here. Seeing their lady, Marina happily runs to meet her. Anna's worried that the Duchess returned alone. It's way too risky. Wilhelmina finds that funny, since there's absolutely nothing to fear in the castle. Still, even though Anna's shift was over, she was anxious about her lady's return. Marina whispers in the heroine's ear that the maid was worried something bad might happen to her. Hearing that, Anna rushes to the girl and covers her mouth with her hand. Watching them, Wilhelmina realizes these two were afraid the nobles might not care about her. The girl feels so warm inside from the kindness these servants show her. She thanks Anna and assures her that nothing bad happened. The maid is super relieved to hear that. Taking the Duchess's hand on the way inside, Marina gushes about how incredibly beautiful she is. The heroine herself is blown away by how perfectly the outfit, adorned with precious jewels, matches her hair. Helena really went all out on the details. Even though Wilhelmina isn't her favorite person, the fact that she prepared an outfit befitting the senior duchess shows she's proud of the family at least. The heroine agrees with Marina. The dress is seriously gorgeous. But the girl wasn't talking about her lady's outfit, but about her shining like a star in the night sky. To thank Marina for the compliment, the Duchess suggests they both have a cup of warm milk before bed. Anna jumps at the idea and promises to get everything ready. She's asking her to get 3 cups ready and join them. And even though the ballroom in the Duke's grand castle was lavish, the heroine likes it best here, in the outbuilding. After talking with Wilhelmina, Count Isanon senses that his companion is on edge. This is a guy who wouldn't flinch facing down hundreds of enemies, and now he can barely breathe around one woman. The Count asks why he doesn't just take off his helmet and say hello properly. But the knight just wasn't expecting a meeting like this. Isanon sighs, unsure if it's stubbornness or just excessive loyalty. But whatever's going on his end, it looks like this woman named Wilhelmina is doing pretty well for herself. She doesn't look worn down by the family drama, and she's even carrying herself with the confidence of someone who owns the place. The Count tells his companion that he's got his back, as thanks for all his help. But he's saying, don't go overboard, all right? He can't just ditch his post for too long, you know? Taking off his helmet, this dude with the black hair and red eyes thanks the Earl for the heads up. The governor thinks Jake would be seriously bummed if he saw him looking like this. But there was just no other way to get in here, man. Isenon's here by invitation, so now he's planning to meet with Duke Leighton. This guy's about to bounce. He just came to congratulate the Earl, not to stir up drama with his family. But the governor knows His Grace doesn't see it that way at all. The guy says his goodbyes and tells him not to bother seeing him out. And even though the Earl would love to share a drink with this guy, he's gotta let him go. The dude's already heading out, but then he suddenly stops. He's tasking the Earl with finding out what kind of life the girl's living and reporting everything back to him. Like she and Johann planned, they're chilling on a bench Wednesday and the kid's happily scarfing down a baked potato. He's saying that in his opinion the most successful merchant guild right now is Goldrail, because they've got it all. They're a new trading company, only recently got their noble title. The heroine remembers how in her past life, a student explained to her that someone who's been reborn absolutely has to make money. It's a solid point, because right now Wilhelmina can count on the Leighton's support, but who knows what the future holds. But she probably can't just use modern scientific knowledge to build a fortune. So the Duchess asks Johann if there's any interesting buzz about Goldrail. The kid knows there's a woman there who's dealing in flour. There's a shop that sells flour, salt, sugar, and the owner, Jane, is a really unique lady. She's the youngest in the Goldrail family, and she's got sky-high ambitions, so she's always cooking up some wild marketing schemes. To boost sales, she was doing sugar tastings, but that stuff's way too pricey to be giving away for free. So, corporate sent a guy down to shut the tastings down, and Jane totally lost it on him. This girl's stubborn, driven, and on top of that, she's the baby of a super-rich family. Wilhelmina didn't expect to find someone this perfect so quickly. Looks like bringing Johann in was definitely the right call. It's tough to invent stuff from scratch, but if we combine local tech with the conveniences of the future, we could have a killer product. That's why Wilhelmina's determined to get Jane on board, no matter what. Wasting no time, she fires off a letter to the girl and asks Johann to deliver it. The kid's all surprised, asking the Duchess if she's about to start a business. Wilhelmina smiles and says, "You gotta try everything you can." Johann shoves the letter in his pocket and wishes her good luck. He gets up and heads to the garden to tend to the plants. The heroine suggests they go to the castle together since she needs to check on the Duchess. Johann looks at her, freaked out, but she laughs and tells him not to worry. Whatever Wilhelmina's being called in for must be a big deal, if they sent for her first thing in the morning. The Leightons probably want to talk about what went down at the reception. Wilhelmina was supposed to be hosting for the Duke's house, but instead she was busy looking after the Viscount's daughter. But she's willing to take the heat to quiet the rumors about Irina, since gossip usually focuses on one person. Before going into the drawing room, she figures she'll need to apologize if Helena starts complaining. Wilhelmina walks in and Michael's already on his feet, grinning like a fool to greet her. He asks her to sit down and tells Helena to lighten up a little. The Duke's stoked they're finally all together, like one big happy family. He keeps fussing around and offers to make tea for his dear mother himself. She can feel Helena's eyes burning a hole right through her. Michael, on the other hand, is acting like everything's sunshine and rainbows. Her student told her that in these kinds of stories, the real bad guy isn't always the obvious villain. The Duke smiles and invites Wilhelmina to have lunch with them now that she's here. Meanwhile, her student's words are echoing in her head. The ones to watch out for are the seemingly harmless simpletons. When she first met Michael, she figured he was hiding something nasty under that innocent act, but it's pretty clear he's the real deal. That dude's way too optimistic, doesn't even realize how dumb he looks taking Wilhelmina's side in front of his wife. This whole situation is super awkward for our girl, and she says she needs to have a word with Helena. Out of nowhere, Michael chimes in, saying he and his wife were planning on dropping by her place. Wilhelmina's fuming inside, cause the Duke's just stirring the pot even more with his wife. But out loud, cool as a cucumber, she says that's not necessary, there are way too many people around there. After she says that, Helena's face seems to soften up a little. Wilhelmina figures if it's not a big deal, they can just shoot her a letter, cause they're both probably swamped anyway. But Michael's back at it again, suggesting they don't just write, but get together for tea at least once a week. Helena asks her husband to give her and her mother some privacy, cause she wants to talk about that little get-together the other day. The Duke smiles, gets up from his chair, and heads out of the room. Alone at last, Helena mentions she's heard about the lady from the Viscount Malise family. Because of the mix-up, Wilhelmina missed the celebration for the frontier earl. The girl silently stares at the Duchess. Since it's true she didn't show up to congratulate the Earl, Helena also falls silent for a moment. Then she pulls a thank you letter from her pocket and hands it to Wilhelmina. The Milisi family's wax seal on the envelope is unbroken, meaning the Laytons haven't read it. That's pretty surprising since letters like these are usually checked. Suddenly, Helena says Wilhelmina acted wisely. It was Irina's first public appearance since her debutante ball. Still, the head of the Duke's household not showing up to the reception is unfortunate, to say the least. Michael comes back into the room, ready to defend his stepmother, but she asks him to let Helena finish. And then, out of nowhere, the Duchess asks Wilhelmina to start planning the next reception. The banquet's going to be held to honor the border knights and the Margrave's soldiers. Apparently, Wilhelmina not showing up at the last reception could be seen as disrespecting the Earl's troops. So Helena's trying to give her a chance to make amends. It might just be for show, but at least it'll shut down the gossip among the social elite. She can't really refuse, so our girl's gotta take on the preparations. Since she already caused a stir, she can at least do this much. The location and budget are already set, and Helena will let her know the dates later. Since that's all settled, Michael, with that dazzling smile of his, suggests having tea again. He asks the servants to bring out some treats to go with it. Helena brewed some herbal tea, good for a cold, and she's asking her mother-in-law to drink it before she leaves. While Michael's fussing around the table, she's wondering how he even manages the duchy with such a gentle personality. Because even if Helena is a genius, the Duke is still officially the head of the family. Looking at his open and carefree face, she's getting worried about the future of the family line. It's like Michael's never really worried about anything, ever. Her apprentice told her that the naive hero is usually a good guy, but the always-in-the-way optimist is a different story. She thinks Michael's cheerful personality didn't just happen, and he had his reasons for putting on that act. There's a knock at the door, and the Duke tells them to come in. The butler apologizes for interrupting and says a letter has arrived that His Grace needs to see. Michael bows to Wilhelmina with genuine regret. He promised Helena he'd be back as soon as he wraps things up. Since the tea's all gone, our girl's about to head home. But then Helena pipes up, saying Viscountess Roland was singing her praises. She said Wilhelmina's still a bit rough around the edges with etiquette, but her genuine kindness is just outstanding. Our heroine's amused, thinking she should stock up on more ginger tea if it had that effect on Madame Roland. But then she catches Helena giving her the cold eye. Wilhelmina realizes those words were a straight-up dig, but for some reason it doesn't even tick her off. Michael's not here, so she doesn't have to play nice. She wonders what Helena's trying to pull and if she's just trying to get a rise out of her. After giving the Duchess a good once-over, she starts laughing, all flustered. The heroine finds it hilarious, both how easy it is to read Helena's mind and how she pretends she doesn't hate her guts. She might be living in a young body in this world, but before she got here, she'd seen all kinds of people. Especially considering that in the modern world, where status isn't everything, everyone deals with that kind of thing. Wilhelmina promises Helena that she'll try not to get a big head and will become a worthy duchess. After all, conflicts between a mother-in-law and daughter-in-law only destroy the peace of a family. Helena doesn't say anything and sees the girl off with the same cold, stern look. The heroine has two important things planned for the immediate future. She intends to focus on one of them right now because she needs to make contact with Jane Goldrail. The girl received the Duchess's message and has arrived for her meeting. Wilhelmina's inviting Jane in for tea, says it's kinda chilly out today. She gives Anna a nod, thanks her, and gestures like, "You can go now." But as the maid's leaving the room, she bumps right into some dude in the doorway. Wilhelmina's all surprised, staring at this tall stranger. Anna apologizes, tries to squeeze past the guy. For a split second there, it felt like their eyes locked. Jane tells the Duchess not to freak out. It's just her messenger. She forgot to tell him to wait somewhere else. The girl takes a sip of the tea and is blown away by the weird taste. Wilhelmina explains it's made from quince, which is supposed to be great when you're feeling under the weather. She says she found the stuff in the food storage when she was looking for something to replace that super expensive ginger. Jane heard Wilhelmina's thinking about offering a partnership, and our guild's always open to new opportunities. But the girl sees herself as just a humble little merchant and worries she won't measure up to the Duchess's sharp mind. With that politely veiled refusal, Jane's just dodging connections with aristocrats and unnecessary headaches. Our girl knows that, so she explains that the girl misunderstood, and she's not planning to propose a partnership. Wilhelmina smiles and says she wants to invest in Jane's business. The girl apologizes and asks, surprised, if the Duchess knows what she does. Lady Layton says yes, since she knows Jane deals in grains and spices. A shop like that definitely makes a profit, and her income's steady, but it's not exactly hitting the jackpot. Still, Jane's been trying to break through that ceiling, running promotions and even bringing in chefs for tastings. All those marketing moves were ahead of their time, even if the girl pushed it a little too far. No matter how creative the ad is, if it's aimed at poor commoners, it ain't gonna make a big splash. The heroine heard Jane selling flour cheap to orphans, including Johann. Wilhelmina appreciates the girl's kindness, and that's why she wants to make a small investment. We're not talking charity here, this is strictly an investment. The Duchess is definitely well disposed towards Jane, but wants to emphasize that this will be a business relationship. The girl takes the flour Wilhelmina offers and promises to do her best to live up to her expectations. The Duchess isn't expecting huge profits right away. The main thing is to avoid losses and preserve the initial capital. That goes without saying for Jane, because messing with the initial capital is a serious offense. When a merchant gets an investment from a noble, they sign a note guaranteeing the safety of the original investment. Otherwise, they're looking at jail time, and the debt even falls on their descendants. If a convict's broke, his whole family gets thrown in the slammer, and he's stuck doing hard labor for life with a brand on his name. Wilhelmina's wondering if the funding comes with strings attached, like restrictions on the initial investment. Jane explains that's why businesses that get huge investments are often called a high-stakes gamble. The Duchess is surprised they don't audit the books properly, since it's so easy to cook the numbers that way. But Jane's never even heard those kinds of terms. The main character gives the girl a basic rundown in plain English of what accounting reports are. Jane Goldrail studies the woman sitting across from her intently. It suddenly hits her that Wilhelmina isn't just some ordinary noblewoman. She's got this weird charisma, but at the end of the day, she's just some young rich girl. Jane doesn't want to get mixed up with the upper crust and get dragged into a whole mess of trouble. So her plan was just to play along, take the investment, then back out and return the original amount. But then Wilhelmina dropped a bomb on her, revealing they're cooking the books for profit. And get this, the Duchess says there's also reverse accounting fraud going on. Jane's totally lost. How can you get investments by under-reporting your profits? But Wilhelmina explains they're not dropping the numbers too much, just enough to create the illusion of growth. She builds 2 sugar cube towers and says, imagine each cube is profit, and each layer is a year. Since the number of cubes is the same, the total profit over time is equal. The Duchess asks which company Jane would invest in, and she points to the one where profits are steadily climbing. And that's when Wilhelmina lays it on her. That steadily growing company could just have fake books. Anyone looking to the future will invest in the company with gradual growth, and that's how they get scammed. Jane's convinced these companies will be seen as total frauds if this all goes south. Wilhelmina's saying it's a high-stakes gamble, betting everything to make a killing and pay it all back. And if these trading houses have shell companies, they can cook the books like crazy. They're just trading guilds that exist on paper only. They pretend to be subsidiaries or act like they have assets, but they're totally broke. Jane looks at Wilhelmina, impressed, realizing how wrong she was about her at first. Before getting into the carriage, the girl thanks the Duchess for the insightful chat and asks if she can visit again. Jane promises to drop by more often, since she really has a lot to learn from Lady Layton. Lady Goldrail's gone, and now our girl has to deal with the rest of her stuff. Even though it's freezing out and she really doesn't want to leave, she can't plan a celebration stuck at home. Suddenly, Wilhelmina hears someone nearby raising hell. Getting closer, she sees Anna arguing with some dude. The Duchess asks the maid what all the commotion is about. Anna apologizes and explains she was just trying to rent a horse for them, but the stable hand's saying these are top-of-the-line thoroughbreds and you need the Duke's permission to use them. The heroine finds it hilarious that a mother has to ask her son for permission to take a carriage to leave the house. Clearly, the servants don't see her as the real boss, so they can't just lend her a horse. Crossing her arms, Wilhelmina suddenly throws her head back and declares she'll just have to walk. The stable hand promises to immediately call for a first-class carriage from outside for her ladyship. Anna's worried that riding in such a fancy carriage could damage the Duchess's reputation. Wilhelmina knows that's messed up, but she says it's no big deal, 'cause people are more important than reputations. Before the stable hand can even crack a smile, she adds that it's kinda weird to keep horses in the outbuilding that you can't even ride. So she's gonna get in touch with Helena and have her move the stables out of here. The guy's face drops faster than a lead balloon, and beads of sweat pop out on his forehead. Wilhelmina promises to move the horses to the main stables, and while she's at it, change the stable hand's duties. She's trying to make things comfortable for the servants in the outbuilding, and that's only possible because they recognize her as the boss. But she ain't gonna let her kindness be mistaken for an open invitation to cross the line. Realizing that, the stable hand immediately offers Wilhelmina one of the horses. But Anna tells her that it's the oldest and cheapest horse they got on the whole estate. The heroine smirks at the guy, who's desperate not to get canned, but still can't bring himself to show her any respect. Truth is, the stable hand's scared stiff something'll happen to the other horses. The girl smiles and says he's right. She respects his dedication to the job. That's exactly why she's sending the stable hand somewhere she won't be bothered. Seeing the fear on the guy's face, Wilhelmina tells him to chill. She's not sending him to the slammer. Though disobeying your master is a way bigger deal than just not handing over a horse. The stable hand's so freaked out he can't stand, and when the Duchess and maid leave, he drops to his knees. Meanwhile, Anna whispers to her mistress that the old guy doesn't even show up for morning roll call. He works alone, so nobody yells at him for sleeping in, no discipline whatsoever. That's why the guy's terrified to go back to the castle. Things are gonna be rough for him. Still, Anna thinks that punishment's way too light for him. Stepping outside the castle walls, the heroine and her maid witness a full-on brawl. Anna immediately jumps to cover her mistress's eyes. Gawking at shirtless dudes is just not proper. Wilhelmina, though, doesn't think taking your shirt off during training is anything out of the ordinary. Suddenly, the governor approaches them and asks the Duchess what brings her here. The guy orders the knights to clear everything off the training grounds ASAP and get their clothes on, pronto. After training, the guys usually hit up the local tavern for a pint. Wilhelmina came here with the Earl, wanting to ask him a few questions about the celebratory banquet. The heroine wants to take all the governor's preferences into account. Isanon thinks the warriors will be happy with good food and wine, but they should probably skip the theater performances and dances. And while he can't help the Duchess with more specific details himself, the Earl knows someone who's perfect for the job. He tells the girl to wait a sec and gets up to go get this guy. Anna's surprised the governor doesn't just order the servants around, but does everything himself. Into the tavern walks Nada Sanan, the one the commander called in to help the Duchess. Seeing a woman knight, Anna actually yelps. She's so caught off guard. The heroine apologizes for her maid's rudeness and asks the knight to have a seat. Nada smiles and admits that she's not actually a man. Truth is, she's genderless and people like her are called Fae. Fae are a people born from nature, a rare race you don't often see in the human world. They can be born from raging volcanoes or ancient trees. The core of their being isn't tied to a physical body, so they don't need a gender. So even though the science nerds still argue if they're a race or just spirits, the heroine figures they're not that different from regular folks. Since the Count vouched for Nate, Wilhelmina wants him to lay out his ideas for the festival, no sugarcoating. She promises to reward the knight for good ideas, because it's super important to her that this festival is a hit. Nate thinks the festival would be way more fun with some actual events, not just fancy food and shows. He's saying the soldiers and knights themselves should get involved in those events. After a moment, the heroine suggests throwing a martial arts tournament. Nate figures they'll be all over that, because anyone who's confident in their strength always wants to show it off. The heroine's thinking about how to spice up a regular tournament, make it exciting even for the audience. Suddenly, Nate tells the Duchess that, unfortunately, he won't be able to compete. 'Cause let's be real, who's gonna go all out against someone with a pretty face? That's when Wilhelmina has this brilliant idea. She suggests throwing an anonymous tournament. Everyone wears flashy masks and ridiculous costumes just to make fighting extra hard. The Duchess wants to make it like some game show where everyone has a goofy nickname. That way, it'll be harder to figure out who's who, so fighters can just focus on skill and keep things fair. Nada grabs the heroine's hands, begging her to make this tournament happen, 'cause she's dying to prove herself. The Count's never seen Nada this worked up, so he's gotta know what they were talking about with the Duchess. Isanon pulls up a chair and Wilhelmina fills him in on their plan. The girl asks him to spare a few soldiers for security and to get the arena ready, just in case. Besides that, they're gonna need some practice weapons and a first aid kit. The Count tells Nada to round up some free hands and get a crew together. After seeing the night off, he marvels at the Duchess's insight. As soon as he heard about the masked tournament, he knew it was perfect for Nat. It's been tough for him to build rapport with the other knights because of his unusual background and looks. The army's a pretty rigid structure, and it can be rough for anyone who's different. Plus, his term of service is almost up, and Nat's gonna need to find a new lord. Usually, the lord himself bestows the title of knight, but if you earn it through military service, like Nat, you become a free knight after leaving the army. Truth is, the title of knight only really means something when you've got a lord. Otherwise, you're basically just a wanderer. The Margrave wants Nat to go out and find a new lord. His combat skills are off the charts, and he's one of the best fighters in one-on-one duels. The Margrave's army is the most powerful force in the West. If Nate had mad skills and still got rejected, yeah, that'd be a real gut punch. Isanon suggests we schedule the event for next weekend, then gets up to see the Duchess out. Wilhelmina thanks him for his consideration and asks Anna to call for a carriage. The Count's pretty surprised the Duchess showed up without a ride, but she explains there weren't any horses available back at the estate. Giving Anna a seriously nasty look for some reason, Isanon promises to personally take care of the carriage situation. Stepping outside, the girl's jaws just drop. They've got 6 gorgeous black horses waiting for them, all hitched to this dark, ominous carriage, totally fit for a battlefield. Our girl's almost too scared to get in. It looks like she's heading off to war. The Margrave tells Wilhelmina to hop in and promises it'll be a smooth ride. Since Isanon's heading out anyway, he decides to keep the Duchess company. The girl finds it weird how friendly the Earl is being with her. If she wasn't a Duchess now, she probably wouldn't have ever been able to talk to him. Out of nowhere, the Earl asks Wilhelmina to forget about that meeting in the garden by the lake. She agrees, but she's sure that now she'll be thinking about it even more. Hearing about the garden meeting, Anna asks Wilhelmina what happened, but the girl dodges the question. As they pull up to the estate, she spots Helena chatting with some guy. According to the maid, it's the stable hand, Mr. Jackson, the same one who refused to give the lady any horses. Earl Isanon overhears Anna's words and a flash of anger sparks in his eyes. Spotting an unfamiliar carriage, Helena turns around and is shocked to see Wilhelmina stepping out. The Earl's saying they were discussing the party prep, and since the Duchess didn't have a carriage, he offered her a ride. Helena thanks Isanon for his concern, but he insists a knight can't let a noble lady travel alone. Wilhelmina watches surprised as the Earl defends the Duchess, staring right into her eyes with a cold look. The girl doesn't get why Isanon's helping her so much, considering her pretty weak standing in the Duke's household. After all, no matter how you slice it, the Margrave doesn't gain anything by making enemies in the Leighton house. The man bows politely to Wilhelmina and promises they'll meet again soon. After seeing the Earl off, our girl looks at the stable hand, who's shaking like a leaf behind Helena. She figured he'd get a scolding, sure, but the old guy's trembling like he's facing the firing squad. Helena says that a new carriage and horse will be ready for her mother soon. Wilhelmina wonders what's going to happen to the horses that were in the outbuilding. Helena says they belong to His Grace, the Duke. The main character figures the Leightons are going to buy her a horse that's appropriate to her status, and this apology is pretty smooth. Helena adds that she found out the stable hand hasn't been doing his job right, so she's planning to punish him accordingly. But before she does, she wants to know what Wilhelmina thinks about it. Anna notices the air between the two ladies suddenly getting pretty thick. The main character realizes Helena's trying to make her look like the bad guy, the one who punishes the servant. Originally, she just wanted to solve the problem by moving him to another job. But if she lets him off without punishment now, she'll lose what little authority she has, even though she doesn't really have any power to begin with. The main character doesn't know if it's worth fighting over principles over something so small, so she decides to ask Helena just one question. She's asking exactly who this stable hand reports to. If he's listed as staff for the annex, then Wilhelmina's to blame for his screw-up, 'cause she failed to manage things. And if he's annex staff, then the horses he cared for belong to the annex too. But if he's on the main house roster, it's the opposite. Of course, Helena would prefer the second option, but the second she admits that, she takes the blame for everything that happened. The heroine figures, if she's losing horses and respect anyway, she might as well be generous and win people over. Still, she's curious what Helena will do, and if she'll follow her mother-in-law's lead if she forgives the stable hand. Later, after it's all over, Anna admits to Wilhelmina she was really worried a fight was gonna break out. 'Cause it was the first time she'd ever seen the younger mistress looking so fierce. And even though Helena always gave the heroine that impression, apparently she looked different in the eyes of the servants. The confrontation with her ended way too easily, out of nowhere. She admitted her mistake and said Jackson would only get a slap on the wrist. But the other stable hands ended up giving him hell for slacking off and not pulling his weight. Sir Nat approaches Wilhelmina, followed by some other knights. They brought everything the Margrave's heroine asked for. Even though Nat's trying to hide his intentions, she can see the worry on his face. Wilhelmina suggests the knight come take a look at the costumes with her. Stepping into the room, Nat's surprised to see the kids happily working with the fabrics. When the knight asks if they're servants, she says these kids just live on the estate. Wilhelmina offered them the chance to prep the costumes for the event, and they jumped at it. It's a charity thing, where the kids get to spend a week in a warm room. For their effort, they'll get paid the same as they'd earn working a week in the fields. Plus, the kids can take home any leftover scraps of fabric after the sewing's done. Wilhelmina doesn't care about the quality of the costumes, because even if they look ridiculous, that's part of the charm. If we announce that everything was made by children, especially for a good cause, it'll all seem just adorable. She's convinced that even if it affects the knight's reputation, it'll only be in a good way. She tells Nate not to sweat it, because a professional tailor will handle the final touches anyway. The heroine suggests the knight join the kids, and he agrees. When he and Wilhelmina sit down next to the children, Nate is surprised that they call the Duchess Sis. The heroine shows him the right way to stitch pieces of fabric together, and the knight gets to work. Before long, though, he's surrounded by kids who are curious about who this beautiful girl is. Wilhelmina jumps in to help the bewildered Nate, telling them this isn't just some girl or guy, but a total badass knight. The kids can't hide how impressed they are, and they bombard him with questions all at once. Once Nate and Wilhelmina leave the room, the knight is blown away by how awesome the Duchess is with the kids. But she doesn't see anything special about what she did. After all, she just gave the kids a little cash and something to do. Wilhelmina figures since she didn't earn that money herself, there's nothing to praise her for. Now Nate gets how down-to-earth and real the Duchess actually is. She invites the knight down to the dining hall but suddenly stops, hearing someone raising their voice downstairs. One of the knights was grilling Commander Derek about why he volunteered to escort Sir Nate, but the guy doesn't get what all the fuss is about. This knight's saying Nada looks down on squires, even though he only became a knight himself in 3 years because of his pretty face. Derek's saying all this talk is just based on the guy's own insecurities. They're all bent out of shape because Nada doesn't show up for training. But the truth is, the knight was training, just at dawn, before anyone else hit the practice field. Derek gets why the guys are ticked off about Sir Nada's skills. He suggests splitting up the duties smart. They handle the tough stuff, and Nada escorts the Duchess. Clearly, Derek's one of those guys who can play the game so slick he turns any situation to his advantage. Realizing all this, our girl tells Sir Nada to hold his head high. Looking the knight straight in the eye, she orders him to win the upcoming tournament, no matter what. The only way to shut down these bogus accusations is to prove his strength. Nobody knows their opponent in this tournament, and all Nate needs to do is win. Our girl figures this could help the knight turn things around for himself. If anyone's judging him on anything but skill, he needs to show him what his blade can do. Wilhelmina's betting that if Nate's been putting in the work, he's gonna crush this tournament. Celebration Day is here, and Wilhelmina and the Count are going over the ceremony's plan. After the welcome speech, we'll hand out the medals, and then it's tourney time. She suggests Count Eisenon break out the dress uniform to set the mood. Wilhelmina's planning to dress up too, and shows off her mask. She'd rather hide her face since she's gonna be reporting live. Keeps things spicy for the audience. The Count scans the knights gathered below and asks the Duchess what she thinks of Nate. Even though she's playing dumb, acting like she doesn't know what he's getting at, Isanon's sure she's figured it out. The Count's got that look in his eyes, you know, like he sees right through you, so she decides to just tell him what she thinks. Wilhelmina thinks Sir Nat's in a tight spot, and the more Isanon shines a spotlight on him, the worse things get. If that knight realized the Count was on his side, he could actually get stuff done. What makes it worse is he's got this naive idea that just being good with a sword fixes everything. If Nat knew how to make allies or use his damn title, this whole thing would be way easier. But the Count thinks using this internal conflict to his advantage? That's beneath a knight. Wilhelmina's thinking, hey, bullying people ain't exactly knightly behavior either. It's insane to expect the victim to play by the rules when the guys doing the bullying aren't even following them. There are some things in this world that you just can't solve with being fair. Nate had a ton of resources he could have tapped into. If he'd played it smarter, he wouldn't have needed to ask for outside help. Wilhelmina couldn't bring herself to say any of that to the knight's face, though. The Count points out that the Duchess ended up choosing the most complicated route. The heroine admits it ticks her off when people don't get rewarded for their efforts. Isanon's finally getting a glimpse of what the Duchess is really like. Sir Nate overheard their conversation, and now he's dead set on winning this competition. But on his way to the arena, he runs into Derek. He says there are way too many contestants in the tourney, so winning will be tough, and tells Nate not to sweat it too much. The knight could handle being hated by squires who hadn't fought alongside him. Derek saw his moves, and now he's not just twisting the truth about him, he's mocking the Duchess's tournament too. Nada asks the guy if he's already making excuses for when he loses. Derek's behavior is so disgusting to the knight that he's barely holding it together. The guy doesn't get why Nada's mad. He was just trying to give him a pep talk before the fight, supposedly. In that case, the knight hopes Derek won't get stage fright either, and that he'll show everyone what he's got. He also reminds him about the rule of taking off the mask after a loss. As Nada walks away, Derek glares after him, his eyes burning with malice and hate. Wilhelmina, wearing a rabbit mask, announces the start of the Leighton House martial arts tournament. Before kicking things off, she asks everyone to welcome Count Titan Isanon, who helped put the event together. The girl explains the rules of the tournament, which will be single elimination. We've got special prizes for the tournament winner and for the viewer who guesses the most masked contestants. The champion gets a one-of-a-kind sword forged by the legendary Leighton Smiths, and the viewer who correctly identifies the most fighters wins a set of pure white stirrups. The crowd in the stands is going wild, ready for the tournament to kick off. Our hostess announces the start of the first ever masked martial arts tournament. Entering the arena, Sir Slippery Slug and Sir Aromatic Pigtrotters. Next up, Sir Bluebear, who's already looking a little wobbly out there. But the crowd figures out pretty quick that it's Bill is hiding under that bear mask. With a sly grin, our hostess asks the Earl what his predictions are for this fight. But to her surprise, Isanon plays along, snatches the mic, and even cracks a joke about it. Wilhelmina never expected the event to be such a hit. And now, the tournament's down to the last fight of this round, after which we'll have our final 8. The announcer calls out the first contestant, and it's Sir Duck of the Boglands. The moment we've all been waiting for, Sir Nate enters the arena, in a pie costume. She never imagined they'd sew him such an outfit, and hoped he'd pick something more practical. The knight chose this heavy, stuffy costume only because the kids made it for him. Among the audience's predictions, Nate's name never even came up. The Duchess is hoping the knight will show everyone what he's made of in the arena. But his opponent, like everyone else watching, suddenly freezes in astonishment. Sir Pie pulls out a toy weapon. The kids gave it to him. Duck might think it's cocky as hell, but he gets nailed with a shot so hard he stumbles. Throughout the tournament, Nate keeps racking up wins like it's nothing. A question starts brewing in the crowd's minds. Who the heck is this mysterious fighter? They'll be waiting for his next fight, and before they know it, they're actually rooting for this masked nobody. Just like that, step by step, Nate's turned every one of his 3 fights into a total spectacle. His confidence in himself has become a huge inspiration, not just for the regular grunts, but for the knights too. The moment of truth is here, and the long-awaited final battle begins. In the finals, it's Sir Blackhorse, who crushes all his opponents, versus Sir Pie. But before the match starts, Sir Blackhorse asks for a moment. Since this is the finals, he suggests both fighters unmask themselves. Derek doesn't see the point in hiding anymore since his identity's blown and all that's left is Sir Pie. The crowd's totally hyped about this idea, but our girl knows they can't let that happen, because a lot of the knights still don't respect Nat as an equal. The knight himself ain't backing down either, says he can't grant his opponent's request. This suit was hand-stitched by a young lady named Terina, and her dream was to taste a pie. But life was too harsh, and all she ever had on her table was stale bread and potatoes. This fairy pie costume was made for her dream, and that's why the knight can't take it off. Since Nat managed to wiggle out of it this time, the heroine decides not to give her opponent another chance to grab onto anything. She calls for a final showdown while the competitors are still fired up. At first, Sir Pie had the upper hand, but then, out of nowhere, Derek suddenly kicked it into overdrive. She's thrown off because he doesn't exactly scream natural talent. The Count explains that Derek's using magic. He's so subtle about it, it's damn near impossible to catch him in the act. It's not against the rules of the tournament, so it's a gray area at best. Nate could use magic too, technically, but the problem is fairies have way too much mana. Hiding it like Derek does would be a major pain, and it'd make him look like a cheat. Wilhelmina had no idea there were loopholes like that in this world's fights. According to the rules, you only lose if you're forced out of the ring or you tap out, so now she's not so sure Nate can pull off a win. The crowd's starting to whisper that Derek's using magic under that black stallion mask. But the knight doesn't care. He's gotta win, even if it means looking like a chump to the other knights. Derek knows they're not evenly matched, and if this keeps up, Nada's gonna lose. Just when our hero's racking her brain for a plan, her weapon snaps. But she tosses it aside and gets ready to throw down bare-knuckle style. Derek aims his sword, but she deflects it with her bare hand. Next thing you know, the black stallion eats a serious fist sandwich. Derek jumps up, charges, and whips out a hidden dagger from his sleeve. But Nada sees the blade isn't aimed at him. The dagger whizzes past his shoulder and flies straight for Wilhelmina. Count Eisenon reacts instantly, shielding the girl with his body. But Nada suddenly takes flight, snatching the dagger aimed at her. The heroine stares in amazement at the knight's unfolded wings, which turn out to be real. Derek removes his mask and declares that Fairy Pie lost because he stepped outside the arena. Wilhelmina's sure this son of a biscuit eater did it on purpose. The girl turns to Derek and asks why he threw the dagger at her. She's furious that he'd stoop so low just to disqualify an opponent. But the knight claims he would never resort to such underhanded tactics. He blames the whole thing on his opponent, who failed to catch the dagger and dodged it. Wilhelmina tells him to show some respect and address Sir Nada by his title. Derek knew exactly who he was fighting, judging by what he said. The knight's accusing the host of slander, saying he had no reason to attack some random nobody. She takes off her mask and says Derek knew damn well who she was, 'cause if he wasn't trying to disqualify Nate from the duel, he threw that dagger at her to kill her. The crowd's stunned, watching the Duchess corner Derek like that. Turning to the Count, Wilhelmina says she's seriously disappointed, especially 'cause this was a celebration for his knights. Eisenon takes the blame, apologizes to the Duchess, and promises to personally handle this whole mess. The heroine turns to Sir Nate and asks what he thinks about all this. The knight believes that those in the Order of Eisenon shouldn't be hurting others. Nate was actually ready to lose to save the Duchess, so now she's gotta help him out. The girl's stepping up, taking the blame for the fight getting messed up, and wants a rematch. The Duchess orders everyone to take off their masks and fight fair this time. Otherwise, the Margrave as a witness will launch a full-blown investigation. Derek drops his mask on the ground and announces he's giving up. That evening, Wilhelmina's on her balcony, watching the feast going on in the garden. The Count comes up to her and says he's impressed with how well she handled things today. The Duchess asks if he's finished making his speech. But Eisenon thinks that instead of 1,000 words, some good old-fashioned discipline is what's needed. He's not thrilled with how it went down, but it's a lesson for everyone, and he's glad they could at least ease Nate's situation a little. Eisenon's sure it's all thanks to the Duchess, because she's a total pro at handling a crowd. Hard to believe Wilhelmina wasn't involved in politics or high society before she got married. But she's sure she couldn't have pulled this off alone, and it all happened with his unspoken okay. The Count replies that when you're stuck in command, you learn a thing or two whether you want to or not. She thinks he's softened up towards her, like he's treating her like a granddaughter now. The Count says he's heading back to the border, but he'll adjust his schedule to make the New Year's reception. With that, the man drops to one knee before the Duchess. Then he removes the seal of his Eisenon family from the lapel of his uniform. Count Tayton swears that the Honorable Duchess Wilhelmina Layton rightfully holds her title